Okay, everybody. I apologize if my voice sounds a little strange today. I have a strep throat, so I'm going to try and be my lively self. I will do the best I can. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'll bring up generations, and I'll open up a new document. As Larry said, we're going to do freestanding lace tonight, and what I'm going to go over with you is how to make the base for freestanding lace. Most of you have probably sewn out lace, and there's a grid base that stitches first, and then something stitches on top of that. And that's what I'm going to teach you tonight, is how to do that base and put something on top of it, so that you'll be able to do your own things if you would like to do that. All right, so I'm going to go and insert artwork, insert image, and we're going to pick, let's pick this one here. I'm going to select the artwork. I'm going to choose image as template, and then OK. Now I want this to fit into my 4x4 or 100 by 100 hoop, so I'm going to change it to 95. And when I hit my tab key, you can see that this number over here changes and keeps proportion because maintain aspect ratio is checked. So I'll click OK, and there's the artwork that I want to use. Well, it's still a little bit big, so I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller by grabbing this corner box. When you have these 8 black boxes or handlebars around something, you can just grab the corner one and drag it in diagonally, and it'll resize proportionately for you. So that looks a little better. Now I'll just drag my artwork into the center of the hoop. There are a couple of ways that you can do a freestanding lace base. I'm going to show you what the way to do it very quickly, the long way or the hard way, and then I'm going to show you how I do it, which most of you that know me are going to say, oh, I know she'll have an easier way. First thing I'm going to do is go into the View, View and View Preferences. And into my canvas setting, and I'm going to set my spacing here at 2, because I want my grid to be 2 millimeters. I'm going to choose a line and say OK. Now you can see that my grid here is really tiny, and that's the distance from this line to this line that I want my lace lines, my grid to my base to be at. So I would take up to my 400 view, actually I'm going to go down to my 1-to-1 view. The first thing I'm going to do is take my area tool and start with a left click and work my way around each of these points. Notice how the screen moves. For those of you that are not familiar with generations, that is a feature that was exclusive to generations up until the release of Artista 6. They gave you an option for that. When I get to the end, back where I started, I'm going to hit Enter. And it'll create the shape for you. Okay. Then I'm going into my View Outline icon. It's going to turn gray, and I will right-click inside and choose Create Outline from Area Edges. And I'm just going to make it a run for now and click OK. And you can see the gray line where the outline is going to be. And then I will generate. Then I will go ahead and select the main piece that I just created, the object that I created, and I'm going to Control-Delete to get rid of it. So all I'm going to be left with is that outline. I will turn off my artwork so I can see underneath it. Now I can see my grid underneath it. I'll come up to my 400 view. I'll take my line tool, and starting right here on this line, I will start following my lines back and forth to make the horizontal grid. And I'll do this all the way down the shape, staying right on that outline. Because what we need to do is we need to have a base underneath the design that stays together. And that's what this is going to be. And we're going to actually 4 times. So you can see how much work this is. This is a great deal of work to do the grid. I'm going to go just a little bit more, and then show you the way I do it, which is a lot easier. And some people don't teach it this way in Generations because they think that you can't turn off the overlap, and I'm going to show you about that in a minute. So say I'm all done with my shape, and then I'll hit enter, and it puts my lines in. Let me make this darker so that you can see what it looks like. So that's my horizontal grid. Then I would start wherever I came out, which is right here, pick up my line, and start doing the grid in the vertical position all the way through to make my vertical part of my grid. So you can see this is a lot of work, and could take a very long time. And you saw the set of artwork that I opened up has 10 different shapes, so you would have to be doing this 10 times with the different shapes. And to me this is a lot of work, but this is how you would do it if you don't have the ability to turn off some features in your software. Okay, so we'll just pretend that I did that the whole way. I'm going to change my color. It's already selected. I'm going to right click on the red, select this one, and right click on the red, and it changes everything to red. Then the next thing I would do is wherever I came out, which would in this instance would be up here, I would then come across this way. To make that grid. Crossing each one. Okay. Change my color. And then I would also come across the opposite way to make the grid this way. You can see how much work this is to make that 4-layer grid. And when I turn on my 3D view and go out, you can see right here where that grid is created. Now, those of you that know me know that this is way too much work for me to be happy with it. So I'm going to say close that, and I'm going to open up a new document, bring my artwork back in, same piece of artwork, images template, say OK. I'm going to change this. I'm going to make it a little smaller, maybe to 92. Hit the tab key, click OK. I'm going to take my same tool, my area tool, and I'm going to make the shape. You might want to be taking notes on this because there's a step in here that if you miss it, you won't be happy. Once I've got my shape created, for those of you that have not taken the Digitize in a Day class with me or have not taken a webinar, I'll explain to you what the stitch angle is. Stitch angle is as most of you already know, the angle that you're stitching. So in this instance, this little red wand with the green dot, you would be stitching this way. Okay? If I grab this little green dot, left click and drag and hold, I can change the stitch angle to any of the 360 degrees in the circle. If you look right down here, when I grab that wand, you can see the angle. If you look down there now, you can see the angle that the stitches are going. Right now it says 90. So I'm going to make that 90 degrees. Hit my space bar to go into my stitch properties. Choose complex fill up to my tab, and right here I'm going to change my density. And we know that a 4.0, now you saw the default was 0.4. We know that a 4.0 is roughly a 2 millimeter space in the density. I'll go into my basic tab and turn off underlay. But one more thing, and you might want to write this down, I'm going to use smooth edges. Let me show you what happens when I don't use smooth edges. I'll turn off my artwork. Can you see how these are pointed? It comes out on an angle and then comes down. That's the normal look of your design when you stitch it, to have this angle happening between the lines. But when I go back into complex fill, into my complex tab, I'm going to use smooth edges. I want those edges to come all the way out to the edge of that shape. You can see the difference. I'm going to take my, I'm going to take my arrow, my wand, and I'm going to drag it up and watch my angle. And I'm going to put it at about 90 degrees, which is vertical, up and down. Generate my stitches, and there is my vertical grid for my lace. Well, I already have it selected, so now I'm going to copy it and paste, paste, paste. I'm going to paste it 3 times. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. The second one, I'm going to take it and change the angle over here to the 0 or horizontal. And that puts my grid now vertical and horizontal. That's 2 layers. Then I'll take the third one and change my angle to about 45, or what looks like about a 45-degree angle here. Generate my stitches. You can see my grid filling in now very, very nicely. I'll click on the next one and make that one opposite of the 45, which I just happened to have learned the other day is 315. Those of you that know me know I would not intuitively know that because I failed 5th grade math. Then I'll generate my stitches. So now you can see you've got 4 layers required for the lace base, and they're in there with a lot less effort than what I started showing you when we started. So this is a lot more pleasant experience. Now if I come over here and click on my stitch simulator, this is called the play stitches or the play shadow. That's a color that we set in our preferences so you can see where it's going to stitch. I'll choose 1000 and click on go, and you're going to see that it's going to stitch that vertical part of the grid. Okay, but right there, I'm going to stop it. And let's go back. Okay, let's keep going back. Okay, right here, I'm going to move it along very slowly, and I want you to watch what happens now. As I come up, oops, as I come up, now this should be only one pass right here. It should stop right there. But look what it's doing. It's coming back up and going over that line twice. Right? Well, we don't want that. We don't want that to be twice. So what we do is we choose our lace bases, hit our space bar, and right here under compensation, go into the Edit For box and turn off Enable Overlap. Enable Overlap is there so that if you're stitching this box and you're stitching across like this, and then it comes down here and travels and comes to stitch back this way, Enable Overlap is turned on so that it does overlap 1 or 2 rows of stitching so that there is no gap. That's the purpose of the Enable Overlap. Well, we don't want it to do that for the lace base. We don't want it to stitch multiple times or go over anything. We want it to stitch one time and one time only. So I'm going to turn off Enable Overlap. Go back into my stitch sequencer, stitch viewer. Now watch what happens this time. It may still break and go to the other side and come back like that, which is okay. I don't mind that so much because, you know, it's dealing with push and pull compensation. But watch what happens now. Now it's going to travel over down here to where now it's going to do the horizontal part. This is what we want. We want it to travel around the edges of this shape. We don't want any travel stitches inside on that grid. And the software will do it nicely for you if you give it a chance. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Here's our grid, and our grid looks really nice. The next thing we're going to do is choose this last layer, go up to our View Outline icon, right-click, and I'm going to create an outline from area edges. And it's going to be a satin, and I'm going to make it about a 3.5, which is going to be a pretty wide satin stitch because I want that to be very secure. I'll click OK. You can see where it's going to go and generate. So now that's the base of our lace. There's one more thing I want to do. In this satin border, I want to go into my stitch properties and into the underlay. And I prefer to have a little more underlay than just that zigzag. So I'm going to choose center, and I'm going to choose edge, and then I'm going to choose the zigzag, and I'm going to use down. And I'm going to put 3 different types of underlay in there. One is going to be, if this was my satin area here, one is going to be down the center. Then it's going to be up like this. Then it's going to be zigzag, to make sure that that satin holds together really well for your lace. We'll generate the stitches. Now I know that I have a nice secure satin border on my lace. Let's change the color to something lighter. How about this pink? Okay. All right, click outside the hoop. Now I'm going to bring my artwork back. You can see the artwork underneath there. I'm going to go up to the 400 view, turn off my 3D, and now I can see my artwork again. We have 2 types of satin stitches in generations. We have a side to side where you go side to side, and I can slide this over a little bit. This is a side to side. You use it like this. And that makes a satin edge or a satin column stitch. And then we have the side by side, which I would go along the edge of my shape. When I got to the bottom, I would hit enter. I would come up and in the same direction go along the other side and hit enter twice and get a column stitch. For this exercise, I'm going to use my side by side satin stitch because anytime you have strange shapes, it's easier to use that tool than it is to use the standard side-to-side satin. So I'm going to use that one, but first I'm going to pick up a color, pick up a green. I'm going to use my side-by-side satin. Start right here with my left and right clicks. When I get here, I'll go right. and I get here, I'll hit enter. Then I'm going back over here and following the same direction that I went before. Enter, enter. And it put my satin stitch in for me. Now I don't really like the angle of these stitches, but that's not a problem. I can select it with a right click and go into this icon right here. It's a gray one with red lines. I'll right click inside the gray, because remember gray always means you're going to right click and do something extraordinary. I'll choose Add Stitch Direction Guidelines. And with this, I'm just going to drag a line, maybe. Oops. Just going to drag lines across in the angle that I want those stitches to go and generate my stitches. Now one thing we do need to change is right here. This stitch angle is kind of getting in the way of things. So I'm just going to grab it and move it. Right click again and pick up my Add Stitch Direction. Generate my stitches. And that lays a little bit nicer. I could play with it and make it look even better yet. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is turn off our 3D view. And I'm going to go over here, pick up the same side-by-side satin. Dog's playing with the toys, so you can probably hear that. Hit enter. Start over here on the same side. Hit enter twice. Go over here to this one. Back up if you make a mistake using your backspace key. I'm going to stop here in a minute and ask if you have any questions about what we've covered so far. Hit enter when you're finished with the, oops, always go back to the same side. You always have to go in the same direction. If you don't, you'll get a mess. So you always have to go in the same direction. I don't like that so wide, so I'm just going to kind of make my own shape there. Enter. When you're finished with the first side, you hit enter. And again, this is one of those things that there's a lot of repetition, so you really learn how to use this tool. Hit enter twice when you generate that stitch. I'll go to my fill the screen view, turn on my 3D view. I'm going to drop my tool, right click, hold my control key down, and right click on these leaves. Go into the view angle, right click and pick up my stitch direction. And I'm going to gradually just start changing my stitch direction so that that flows nicely. Make sure that you start outside the area and end outside the area, if you can see how I'm doing that. And I'm just drawing a line where I want my stitch angles to be. And you can change them. Sometimes it's hard to get it the first time because you don't know exactly how it's going to lay, but it's not a big deal. You could change them if you don't like how it looks. Like right there, I think I'll change that. And when you change it, if you hover over those green dots, you can just drag those little green dots wherever you want them to make it flow a little bit smoother for you. Okay, any questions about the grid at this point? Okay, we have several questions. Mm-hmm. Okay, what about connection stitches? On this type of a grid, when we use the stitching simulator, if you'll watch, it'll create the connecting stitches for you. It'll come over here and then it'll run down here and put in those travel stitches for you. Just a minute. As it goes along, you'll see that it'll come out and then add. See how it went down here and then came across? It's coming across and adding those stitches. You can put them in yourself, but if the system does a nice job for you, there's really no need for you to do it. Now watch happen. It's going to come out up here, and then it's going to travel down. I don't mind it traveling down here because that's where it should travel, and it makes that a little more secure. So it's just going in back and forth like this. Now watch, see how it travels down like this? It went like this to get to the other place. So it's going to put your travel stitches in for you. If you let it do it. If I clip these, if I take these scissors and make these scissors visible like that, then I would have to put my own travel stitches in where I wanted them. But since I'm okay with where they put the travel stitches, I'm just going to leave it at that. Next question. Where the grids cross each other, do they interconnect at that point? Yes, they stitch. It's almost like weaving, except you're not going in and out and in and out. You have a layer with another layer with another layer and another layer, and they're all stitching down together so that this is one piece. It's kind of like you're making fabric that you can put your design on top of. This is what we call just a base lace. This is not the type of lace that you see with the real fancy things like Zunt does, where they have all these little connectors that come down to another area and then a connector. That's a whole different lesson and a much more complicated lesson for when the advanced skills are ready. This is not an advanced skill. This is simple base lace for designs. Now you can take almost any shape and do this. So you could make bowls, and you can make Kleenex box covers, and you could make towel holders, all kinds of things with this technique that are freestanding. Oh, okay. The connection stitches with the green part. Well, you're going to see when I put the red in, you're going to see that what's going to happen is from right about here, it's going to finish up on one of these sides, and it's going to connect its way over to this other leaf, and it's going to stitch, and then it's going to connect itself over. Generations puts your travel stitches in for you. You need to check them to make sure it's what you want, but it really does a pretty good job. The only time you need to be concerned is if you've got, like, if this was black and you had light pink here, you wouldn't want it to put those connection stitches in. You would actually want it to be jump stitches. And what you would do is you would clip these. See, these are already clipped because it thinks there's nothing there yet. But you'll notice when we put the pink on top that these are going to change to that, these little scissors. Woohoo, boy, I'm glad to learn this. Cool. Okay, is 2 millimeter standard size for the grid? 2 millimeters, 2 to 4 millimeters is pretty standard. So you would go a setting of 4.0, anywhere from 4.0 to 8.0. I kind of stay away from that 8.0 because it's going to get pretty wide, but I would say 4.0, 4.5, 5.0, 5.5, you should be pretty good unless you have a specific reason or you're looking for a specific look. I'd stay away from that 8.0 spacing.
Next question. In the first leaf that you did, there is a stitch halfway down in the middle of the leaf that looks like it will stitch wrong. Is that stitch okay?
Okay. In the first leaf, there's a stitch halfway down, right there. Sometimes the person said there's a stitch halfway down that looks like it's going to stitch wrong. Sometimes you'll see this with a satin stitch. Don't know why that is, but sometimes you'll see this. I will generally go back and take a look after I do my design and make a change if I need to. I'll click on this little hand, which is your edit hand, and click on this little guy that looks like a pen. Turn off my 3D. Now I can see my stitches. I'll go up to about 800, and right in here is where you can see, make it a little bigger. This is the only time I zoom, guys. The only time I ever zoom. I don't zoom when I digitize. What this is this is just underlay that was put in, and I'll just literally go in and just select one and just delete that. You can see it's not hurting anything in here. It's not going to cause a big gap or anything. I'll put this back down to full view, turn my 3D on, turn these guys off, and go back to 400, and you can see that. Now it's gone. So I'll just go in, and if I see anything like that, I'll just delete it. It's part of the underlay, and it's not a big deal, easy to delete, as you just saw me do.
What is the necessary stitch length for good FSL?
Well, as you saw when I started the lesson, I did not change the default. The default in generations is 0.2. Now you can make that default a little bit longer if you like, but just remember that when you do that, your lace will be a little more lacy and probably a little more open. May not be as tight as you would like it, but I would highly recommend that you experiment with it. I generally use the default unless I have a reason for changing it. Like if I want that line stitch, or if I want those stitches to loft up over something, or I'm doing shading, I'll lengthen my my stitch length. But that's generally, I'll just use the default. But I encourage you to play with the defaults and see what happens when you stitch it out. It's always a good thing to do. Okay, I'm going to move on here. Now if I come back out and take a look, I want to start with the rose part with the piece that's furthest in the back. So I'm going to start here and do this. Then I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to follow it around. I might start here. Yeah, I think I'll start here. And then do this, and then this, and this, and this. Come over here and do this, this, and then the top one. So that's how I'm going to put my rose petals in. I'm again going to use my side-by-side satin tool. Let me escape first and pick a color. Let's pick, oops, I changed my leaf color. Okay, I'm going to right click outside my hoop to drop my green, and I'm going to pick up my pink. Now I'm going to come right here. I'm going to start right here. Enter. Go back over here. Enter, enter. Now you see right here we're going to have to do a little editing. We're going to have to pull that down just a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to select this leaf, and I'm going to select this one. You can see right here where it's not connecting. Go into my view outline, right click, and choose edit, the edit mode. I'm just going to bring that down a little bit so that it covers like that. Generate my stitches. Oops, something locked up here. Okay, generate my stitches. Back up to my 400 view. Pick up my tool and start here. When I get to the end of the first side, I'll hit enter. Back over here in the same direction. Now if I go in the opposite direction, it makes a real mess, so make sure that you stay in the same direction. Enter, enter. I'll come over here. Now let me show you what happens if you go the wrong way so that you know what you did wrong when you do it, because you're going to do it. It's just a matter of time. That's what happens when you go this way and then come back this way. So you want to make sure that you go in the same direction. This is a lot easier to do with this tool than it is to use the regular Satin tool, particularly for new digitizers. That Satin tool is kind of hard to control sometimes on strange shapes. I'm hitting enter at the end, and then in the same direction again. It's really not hard, once it's like anything else. Once you know how to do it and you see it done, you're like, oh, okay, I totally get it. Okay. This goes fast too. It goes really fast. For the longest time, I didn't know what the second Satin tool was, and I had to call Andrea and ask her what this tool was for. And when she showed me, I was really excited because it makes your life a lot easier when you're doing strange satin shapes. Enter twice. And I'm just trying to build this so that it makes sense. Enter. If you make a mistake, use your backspace key. Okay, so we have a decision to make here. I can come this way and then let these pieces come underneath, which I think is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this first. Oops, let's Control Delete that. I'm going to make sure I'm into this area here. I'm going to make sure I'm very well into this area here so that it covers up. And you'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. Okay, and I'm going to take this one and come right around to here. See how I'm covering that area that I went into the path there? double enter. Now I know I can see from these stitches right here that I don't like these angles. So I'm going to go into my angle. We got some weird angles going on there. I'm going to set my stitch direction. It's really very, very simple. I really like this tool. I'm going to generate my stitches. Let's take a look at what we've got. Okay, well, I don't like the angle here either, so I'm going to right-click, go into this gray shape piece with the red lines, right-click, take Add Stitch Angle, and I'm going to put enough in there so that it follows the angle that I want it to follow, the path that I want it to follow. And that looks much better. So now let's go out to our full view. And that's our freestanding lace. But let's reorder these pieces, because I did them in an order that I thought would be good, but I'm going to make them look just a little bit different, I think. I'm going to reorder them. So I'm going to go into Accessories and choose Set Stitching Order. And I'm going to choose 1, 2, I'm just left clicking, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and hit enter. Okay, well, what happened was it went up to the top because that's the only one I selected. So now I'm just going to use my Shift key, select the first one, use my Shift key, right click, and say Move to Bottom. And it's going to pop them right back up so that they're in the right place. And that's really all there is to doing a piece of freestanding lace. If I remove my artwork, doesn't want to go. I'm going to draw a box around the flower. And then I'm going to group it down here with this guy. I'm going to group it. I'm going to take him. I'm going to move him out of the way. I'm going to take this one after I group it. And I want to move it out of the way to get rid of my artwork. Going to group it up. Okay. Now if you look here, you can see the little boxes. I want to get one of those boxes selected. Sometimes it's hard to do, to get rid of the artwork. I want to get one of these boxes selected to move the artwork. Because I'd really like to remove that artwork a little bit. Well, it doesn't want to cooperate. Sometimes if you get your artwork really close to the edge of your design, it's kind of tough to remove your artwork and you have to play with it a little bit. But for now, we just won't worry about it for now, I guess, and we'll just put it back where it was. And I'll come up with a way to do that easily for you in one of the next webinars. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge to remove your artwork, but for now you can't see it, and you can see the freestanding lace base with a little rose on top of it is there, and it wasn't very hard and didn't take very long. We have some questions. You can do this with pretty much any shape. Okay, how did I turn on the scissors that were grayed out? If the scissors are grayed out, like this one right here, all I did was left click on it. And if I left click on them again, it turns them off. And then if we generate our stitches, it should show us right here. See this line right here? Let me get this little guy out of the way so I can see. Okay, you can see these lines right here. Those are the travel stitches underneath here. So if this leaf stitches here, then it's going to travel. It's going to put that travel stitch in for you to stitch this. It's going to travel underneath here and then stitch this one, travel underneath, and then stitch this one. If you don't like them, when you see them, if you don't like where they are, all you have to do is click on those scissors and it'll put jump stitches in there for you instead.
Next one is, how do you make your own travel stitches?
Okay, to make, yeah, that's related. How do I make my own travel stitches? That's a good question. That's a very good question. Let me turn off the pink ones. By clicking the eyeballs, these little eyeballs here, I'm actually turning these off so that we won't be able to see them when I take my 3D view off. They have little red X's in them. When I take my 3D view up, notice they disappeared in my navigator. When I take my 3D view off, they're gone. Okay, I'll turn my artwork back on. If let's say this out was right here. You can move your ins and outs. The in is where the needle goes down in to begin stitching the object, and the out is where the needle comes out. You want your travel stitches to start where the out is. You would come over and grab your line tool and just put your travel stitch in. It would just be a line. And then you would need to move your in right there and move your out right there. Pick up your line tool. That's how you do it. But my feeling is if the software does it for me, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it and try and force it. If I like how the software did it, I'm going to leave it alone. But that's how you put your travel stitches in. And let me turn my artwork back on. To turn these guys back on, I'm going to select them by left-clicking the bottom one, scrolling up, holding my Shift key, and left-click the top one here. And then I'm going to just uncheck this eyeball. And it shows them back on the screen. Yes, at the points on the petals, I am right-clicking for a straight line. That's correct. No, I'm sorry. At the points on the petals, I'm left-clicking. My brain was somewhere else. It's a left click for a point or a straight edge and a right click for a curve. Okay. Someone said that they saw Andrea use the Satin tool that we just used, the side-by-side Satin tool, and she put her stitch angle lines in before she hit enter. That's fine. That's fine. It's just a different way of accomplishing the same goal. The fact that you can change everything and nothing's permanent is really the important thing. Yeah, that's what I have for you tonight. And what I would recommend is that you go and you practice this. You find a design like a coaster type design. Actually, I'll give you this piece of artwork. I have last week's and this week's to upload for you. And I'll give you this piece of artwork. Now remember, when I give you artwork, I have a very stringent guideline from the artist that it's only to be used for your practice. It's not to be used for you to digitize and give away to anyone or to sell or use commercially in any way. It's only for your practice. So I'll be able to give you this artwork so that y'all can practice and watch the webinar again and make your own piece of lace.